Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to sit down and do a currently reading / library haul video. I just wanted to do a casual video to sit down and chat a little bit with you on what I'm reading, and because I've gone to the library to get some Invisible Cities related books to play some catch up because I've been trash at keeping track on. I've been really bad with reading books for the Invisible Cities project this year, so I wanted to spend some time during the summer to catch up with some of the previous countries as well as read from the June countries. So I've got a few books out from the library, and so I wanted to share some of those with you as well as I said, what I'm currently reading. It's a fairly self-explanatory concept, but anyway, so when I'm filming, it's Friday, so it could be Friday reads, but I think I will not have time to edit this. So the books I am currently reading, my main read at the moment is The Lonely City by Olivia Laing, Adventures in the Art of Being Alone. I'm about halfway through this and very much enjoying it. I actually started reading this one a few years ago. It was actually, I think, the most recent time I was on vacation or I was traveling outside of the country. So it was probably 2019, and I started reading it when I was still on vacation in Italy, and then I stopped reading it when I arrived back because I was sort of in the midst of other things, and I think I also just sort of associated the book with my vacation, and I was a bit sad of the vacation being finished. So I didn't reach for this one and then put it back to the shelf, but I was really drawn to it in the past weekend and started reading it and immediately felt very, very connected to this. It's talking about loneliness through particular artists that have in different ways tried to convey the experience and the emotional experiences of loneliness, and loneliness in the sense of different reasons for being lonely. So both the loneliness that can happen in a very urban environment, a big city like New York, which a lot of this book is talking specifically about. It's also talking about loneliness in the sense of exclusion and of being an outsider, being different, different ways of discrimination, and those kinds of things. And this has just been so fun to read because I've been annotating a lot. I've been thinking a lot very actively as I've been reading this book. And I think it's just going sort of exactly, I feel like I'm on the same wavelength as Olivia Laing in terms of the sort of the analysis that she goes on with various artists that she's looking at, and she's sort of combining what she's seeing and observing in art with her own observations on her own life or other things she's witnessing around her, and the matching of or the mix of all of those things have been very much to my taste. So I've been annotating a lot with this one, as I said, and looking things up, mentionings of names and particular art pieces, and it's just been a very fun reading experience. So this has been exactly what I needed. And then I have started a fiction book that's actually Swedish. It is called Separat by Donna Sederowsky, and funnily enough, this sort of fits in with the loneliness theme as well. In general, the tone of this book is very much similar to My Year of Rest and Relaxation, and that was actually the pitch that got me to pick this one up. I will link the Instagram account that is called En Bok om Dagen, where I heard about this book, and that was the reason I picked it up. But as I said, it is sort of a My Year of Rest and Relaxation protagonist who is completely isolated in her own home, and we don't know as readers why she's isolated herself, if it is entirely voluntary or not, whether she has physical limitations or if it's something else that's stopping her from moving around, moving outside of the confinements of her home. But she is making meticulous notes on her life, her inner life, her sort of physical existence, like taking her temperature, those kinds of things, and making note and observations on the news through listening to the radio, sort of her impressions on what is going on around her outside of her confinement. And so obviously, because it's someone who is so isolated, it's talking about loneliness, but also talking about belonging and access to places, having significant others, having a family and other bonds that connect you. And so in that sense, this also made me think of the lady with the little fox fur, in the same way that that protagonist is also lacking a network, lacking the social contacts that binds her to the earth, to society. So this has been really interesting so far. I wish that this was translated to English. So far, I don't think it is. But this, as I said, has been very much suitable with this one. So those are my main two reads at the moment. I have also started listening to two audiobooks, because apparently I couldn't choose which one to listen to first. So Path Through the Woods by Christopher Milne is a book I mentioned in my previous book haul, and it is the second of his memoirs. It's the sort of the sequel. It's not really a memoir duo that you have to read in order, but it is a memoir by the son of A.A. Milne, and in this book he is talking less about being Christopher Robin, about his fame and all of those things. He goes into that in the first memoir, but this one is more about his adult life. So the parts that I've listened to so far have been about him as a soldier in the war, and his opinions on war, and in those things he sort of touches on his father's opinions as well. He also talks about his occupation and sort of how he tried to decide what he wanted to do with his life and those kinds of things. So as I said, I've started listening to this one. I'm not very far into it, but I am really enjoying it, and the audiobook narrator is so fantastic. So highly recommend, if you're at all interested, to check out the audiobook version of his books, or the Winnie the Pooh books as well, is also narrated by the same narrator called Peter Dennis, who is fantastic. So there's that one. And then I have also started listening to Cranford on audio, which is by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I've been sort of missing reading classics for a while. I haven't read any classics, like proper 19th century classics, for a bit, and I don't really know why that is, but I was sort of just in the mood for it, and was considering even listening to a Jane Austen audiobook, but because I've read all of them, I thought that I could get to some of the classics I haven't yet. And Cranford, I've heard, is supposed to be a very funny book, and I have only started it, but I can already tell that I will be enjoying it. It's sort of following, from what I can tell so far, it's following a fairly small community of this small community is mainly made up of women, and they are a very tight-knit community, so they talk with each other on a very regular basis. They sort of pay call to each other, but there's a lot of unspoken rules on how long of a time you spend with each other, how what kind of gifts is appropriate, and those kinds of things. All of the norms and the unspoken rules and regulations to their behavior I'm already finding very entertaining. And there's a man who enters the community that isn't really playing by their rules and seems to be sort of ruffling their feathers. So I have a feeling I will be really enjoying the audiobook of this. The narrator is also really fantastic, and I can't remember what her name is. I will put it on the screen. But yeah, I have started this one and will continue on with it because I'm really enjoying it. So those, I think, are the main books I have at the moment. I am also still reading Writing Out, the biking memoir that I mentioned in my book haul as well, and a few other things that I've started but I'm not actively reading at the moment, so I will talk more about those when I get back to those. So now on to the library books, as I said, that I've got out for. Mostly, I think these are related to Invisible Cities. One of the countries we have for June is the Republic of Congo, so I have 2 books out from the library for that. We have Mr. Fix-It by Richard Ali Mutu, translated from the Lingala by Bienvenu and Sara. And this is a very brief book, so I will probably prioritize this just to get a little bit of a momentum going. And I don't really remember the specifics of this book, but I think it's supposed to be kind of a comedic book. It says his work portrays the everyday realities of Congolese life with a bold, intense style associated with the country's music and fashion. So it sounds like it might be a really fun one. And I talked more about it in the June announcement video. I will link that below. And then the other one I have is Black Moses by Alain Mabanckou, and this has been translated from the French, I think, by Helen Stevenson. The larger-than-life story of an African Oliver Twist who thinks he's Robin Hood. Black Moses is a vital new extension of Alain Mabancou's extraordinary interlinked body of work dedicated to his native Congo and confirms his status as one of our greatest storytellers. I feel like I heard good things about this in connection with its Booker International nomination, and yeah, I'm definitely curious about this. The other country we had for June is Qatar, and I have decided to go the short story route for that. So we have the Djinn, Falls in Love and Other Stories, which is an anthology, and this includes a short story by Sofia Almaria, who is from Qatar, and it's called The Spite House. So that short story is what I will be reading for Qatar. I think she has a novel as well published, but it wasn't available through my library, so I decided to go with this one. So I will read that short story and maybe sample a few of the other ones in this as well. I think it has quite an interesting collection of writers. So stories from people such as Neil Gaiman, Nnedi Okorafor, and some other, Camilla Shamsi. So several names that I recognize, but Sofia Almaria is the author in particular that I decided to borrow this one for. We'll see how this goes, and I think it's going to be stories related to djinns. And then in February, one of the countries we had was Uganda, and I've decided to pick this one up. It's called A Bigger Picture by Vanessa Nakate, and the subtitle is My Fight to Bring a New African Voice to the Climate Crisis. So I don't think I need to say much more than that. I think this will be a fantastic book. I think diversity in the climate change movement and environmentalism is something that is so important and something that is sadly often overlooked. A manifesto and memoir about climate justice and how we can and must build a livable future for all, inclusive to all, by a rising star, the global climate movement. A Bigger Picture presents a new vision for the climate movement based on resilience, sustainability, and genuine equity, as well as telling the inspiring personal story of how a young one found her voice. Nakate shows readers that no matter no matter your age, location, or skin color, you can be an effective activist. So this is obviously combining my interest for nature and environmental issues with the Invisible Cities project and exploring the world. And I think this feels like it would be a very beneficial new perspective in nature-related writing as well. And I saw a really positive review of this one on Instagram the other day and was really happy about that because I hadn't heard anyone talk about it before then. So I will link that person in the description as well. So that is my choice for Uganda. And then one of the countries we had for March was Norway. And I actually own several books that I could have read from my shelves, but I started reading the last part of this series. It's not a trilogy, the series, and I felt like I was missing I was missing out. I was missing things. So I decided to get the first part of this series in the Swedish translation instead of the English. So it is The Other Name, which would be the English translation title, or Det andra namnet in the Swedish translation, by Jon Fosse. So this is his septology series. This is the first and second part. And I started reading the final installment of the septology because it was nominated for the Booker International this year. And I read about halfway through it and both felt dubious about reading it in the English translation when obviously a Swedish translation would be much closer to the Norwegian original. I felt like I was missing something through reading it in the English. And then I also obviously read the final installment in a series that I hadn't read the previous parts in. So I was sort of considering DNFing the book because I was feeling frustrated by it and I wasn't entirely convinced that I wasn't entirely convinced that it was good. I thought that I would give an attempt to the first book in the septology and see if I get on with the Swedish translation more and starting from the beginning. If I don't, then this is not the author for me. But I was as I said, I was kind of frustrated with the final installment, and I couldn't 100% say if my frustration came from reading the end of the series first and reading it in English, or if it was the book itself. So I wanted to make sure and decided to pick this one up. And obviously it's a fairly chunky book. And the thing about this author is that he doesn't like punctuation very much, which, I mean, that in itself can be frustrating, but I think that is a gimmick that I'm not entirely sure is justified because in comparison to something like Hurricane Season, where the lack of punctuation marks makes a difference in the reading experience, to me this is not entirely to me this isn't really making its case with the lack of punctuation mark. I might be convinced otherwise, but I'm not at the moment convinced that it serves a point in the book aside from being a gimmick. But I mostly got this one out of curiosity, so we shall see if I find that I enjoy it a lot more, or if Jon Fosse is just not for me. We'll see. So there's that. The last two I have are because of BookTube. So we have Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu. This I got because of Les from Get Bookish. She had done a video very recently on audiobook recommendations, and she convinced me both that I needed to give the audiobook a try of this one, as well as I wanted to have the physical copy with me as I started the audiobook, because she talked about this one as sort of containing a manuscript, and there was something about her description of it that just made it sound really fun. And I think books that play with the format of playwriting is something I find very interesting. And I was kind of curious how a manuscript format in a book would work in an audiobook. I have access to the audiobook through my library as well, so I thought that I could try a combination of those two, see if I get on with it. But I was just so curious out of her, based solely on her recommendation, so I will link her video in the description as well. And lastly, we have a bit of a odd one for me. I don't very often borrow cookbooks from the library, nor do I talk about cookbooks on this channel very often, but I was convinced to get this one because of Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads. She is one of my current favorite channels to watch. She's done a lot of videos on both cookbooks and on picture books, and just so many different interesting books that I had never heard of, and I've been really enjoying watching her videos. So she did a video entirely talking about this one, The Flavour Equation, the science of great cooking explained plus more than 100 essential recipes by Nick Sharma. And it just sounded so good, and the things she took away from this one sounded like the kind of book that I really needed to spend some time with. So I actually requested my library to buy a copy of this one, and I'm first in line obviously to read it as well. So this book is kind of a cookbook and kind of a as the title says, the science of great cooking. So it's talking about flavors and sort of thinking about how different combinations of things result in a particular type of taste, and sort of both the recipes themselves sounded interesting and delicious, but also the almost scientific attitude to cooking was something that really appealed to me, and seemed like something I would learn a lot from. I will not show you much of the interiors of this book because she does a close-up of several of the pages of this. And so I will link Lindy's video in the description below. Highly recommend checking that video out and seeing if you can get a hold of this one if you are interested in cooking. It looked like it would be very vegan friendly as well, which is important to me. If that is of importance to you, that is good information to have. But yeah, I was really curious about this. I am looking forward to spending some time sitting down with this one and getting inspiration for my cooking as well. So those are the books I am currently reading, and some of the books that I will probably currently be reading in the next few weeks for Invisible City stuff and other things that I have got my eye on. I would love to know if you have anything out from your library at the moment. Are you using your library as much as I am? Even though I don't always get to all of the books I borrow, I am always on, I always have several books out. So at the moment I think I have 18, and these are obviously not all of them. They are always in circulation. I just like having them with me even if I don't get around to them. I hope you're doing fantastic, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.